Progressive brings you Flowetry with Flo.
When Flo flows, she flows in the know. Mind ruminates the rates. Shown them all, I heed the call. Seeing the rest, I choose the best. Sometimes it's ours, sometimes it's not. When the fox walks, is it called a fox trot? That's a real question.
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it is expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. It has been observed that a bike or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launcher. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host,
Rodney Shortridge,
and co-host,
Robin Dalton.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by going to blogtalkradio.com/Within the Chaos. Or to listen in by phone, dial 323-870-4197. You can also call in to speak and ask questions to our guests at the same number at 323-870-4197. From deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight. But I do not have no fiery redhead co-host, so I'll be flying solo again tonight. Tonight, our special guest is Philip Mantle. Philip is an international UFO researcher, lecturer, and broadcaster. His books have been published in 6 different languages around the world. He is the former director of investigations for the British UFO Research Association and former MUFON representative of England. Philip has written articles and features for numerous publications around the world and has been both editor and assistant editor of High Street UFO publications. Philip can be contacted via his website at www.beyondroswell.com, or you can email him at philip.mantle@gmail.com. It's my honor to welcome our special guest, Philip Mantle. Hello, Philip, and thank you for joining us tonight. Ready when you are, sir.
Okay, mate.
What has been your strangest or weirdest case that's just been too amazing or funny to believe?
Well, there's been quite a few. I've got to admit, Rodney.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a bit of everything down the years, and I class myself as fortunate. One thing just sticking in my mind, though, that we had I think in vogue at the moment, Rodney, is the flying triangle. Mm-hmm. And I was watching just a TV documentary the other week with some down there saying, oh, you know, this triangle flew over and it was huge, it was as big as a football field and couldn't be explained. There's no way on earth this could be made. And it reminded me of an encounter we had over an area called Humberside. It's on the east coast of England. That was in December of 1987. And again, this huge triangular object flew over, and it was on the local radio, and I was. We spoke to the local RAF base. Oh, no, it's nothing to do with us. Cut a long story short, and we had 50 or 60 people contact us that night, you know, and I've still got the original reports. And it was very similar to a lot of the flying triangle reports. However, one of the chaps I spoke to on the radio was a former RAF officer. And again, cutting a long story short, what he told me was that this was a refueling exercise. And we found the air station that it came. So what you had was 2 tanker aircraft out front with all the jets lying up behind them, and they would go out up over Humberside on the east coast and then out over the North Sea to do their refueling. But when you looked at it from underneath, it just looked like one huge triangular object. One guy told me it landed in his field. You know, I thought that would be something I'd like to see. However, you know, not any one sighting, but we had in the RAF we had a bomber, and it was called the Vulcan bomber, and it was basically looked like a large triangle with the cockpit sticking out the front. So active service many times. So we had a spate of triangular sightings over the UK, and we nicknamed them the Silent Vulcan. It was, you know, it was the shape of a Vulcan bomber, but it made no noise. And again, what is interesting is if you look at the subject in a broader sense, we start off in Westchester County, upstate New York, where in the late 80s they had a huge wave of flying triangles. They call them banana-shaped things and all kind of stuff. And then here in the UK, we had a spate over Derbyshire, Yorkshire, Lancashire of what we nicknamed the Silent Vulcan. We had one incident, Rodney, where this V-shaped object was flying down the valley. So I'm not talking, you know, thousands of feet in the air. And the witness were actually a couple in a lay-by, having a kiss and a cuddle.
Wow.
And they said that as this thing flew down the valley, a whole armada of cars on this country road were tearing along as if following it. So as if they were part of it, which knew something about it. So when this died down, we then had the UFO wave over Belgium, where the gendarmerie were involved, and it was photographed, caught on the F-111, caught on their fighter aircraft as well, on their radar, and they made that public, the Air Force. Well, some people said, it's only Belgium, but they're part of NATO, and the fighters were, the latest fighters from the United States. So it was wrong to say that it's only Belgium. But again, we could look at each of these incidents in isolation, Rodney. But for me, there's possibly a connection there. I don't know what it is, but we have this wave of triangular sightings from the United States, across the UK, and then Belgium. And then, boom, it's gone.
Wow.
So we still get, reportings of the odd one or two, but to have waves like that seem to, certainly in time, they seem to follow one another. I'm not saying there's any pattern apart from the dates. As one flap ends, another one starts, and that, rather than any one particular site, that kind of wave of things has led me to believe that we were onto something there, and the Belgian Air Force were an example to any Air Force of how they should, cooperate. They weren't laughed at. They weren't ridiculed. They didn't have the funding cut. They weren't sent to Siberia or anywhere else. The general went on TV, and showed this stuff. Didn't have his pension revoked. Wasn't kicked out of the Air Force. Or any such sort of conspiracy theory. So it's things like that more than any one sighting that stick in my head. The thing about the sightings of the triangle over Humberside in 1987, myself and my colleague Gary Anthony had positively proven what this was, and we took this information to some of the witnesses, and they would not believe us, Rodney. They wanted this to be a flying saucer, although it was triangular shaped, and it landed in this farmer's field, or it was flying 30 feet above their house. I didn't know it wasn't. So the will to believe was very strong in some instances. But it was a valuable lesson, and just things that stick in my mind like that, a bit out of the norm, I would say.
Well, kind of going into that, what is the largest crowd of eyewitnesses of a UFO that you know of or that you have investigated yourself?
It's probably one of the sightings I have myself, Rodney. And it was July the 23rd, 1984. And it was just before 10 o'clock in the evening. And I just finished work. So I finished work about 5 to 10. And when I came out of the industrial estate where I used to work, it was one long straight road home. You went over the motorway and there was a roundabout in your way, but it was like, 2 miles at the most. As soon as I came out onto that mountain, it was a lovely summer's evening. The sun had just was setting, a nice orange sky, and I could see in front of me this big light. And I thought, well, I shouldn't be there. And I know a bit about astronomy. In those days, our local airport, which is Leeds, used to close at 10 o'clock. So I knew there were no flights inbound to Leeds. So I was driving by now, so I took off. I went over the motorway, and at the other side there's a lay-by, so I pulled in, and I could now see it was 2 lights. And I lined them up with a lamppost, and they appeared to be perfectly stationary. So I got back in the car, drove about another mile to where I lived, a place called Tingley, and there pulled in at another lay-by, and we lived on a hill. In the valley below us is the city of Leeds, and there's another hill opposite. These 2 lights were hanging over this hill, which was a suburb of Leeds. It's called Middleton. You didn't have to crank your neck to see them. They were right in front of your face. They were like of a pearly white, side by side. The right-hand one was slightly bigger than the left-hand one. And I'm stood there, and they just went, boom, gone. Didn't go up, down, left, right, just gone. And then when I got in the house, I just lived around the corner. I grabbed my camera, went back out, didn't see any. I stood out there for an hour, but when I got back home, my mum said the telephone's been ringing like mad. And I reckon that evening we probably had 200-300 reports. We started on the East Coast at about 9:30, came across East Yorkshire into West Yorkshire, then out to North Yorkshire, turned around, was heading back out towards the coast at about 11:30. So the sightings lasted for about 2 hours, and we plotted them on a map. That's how we got, that trajectory. And again, myself and Mark Birdsall were absolutely inundated at the Yorkshire UFO. I mean, we couldn't handle all the reports of that night. And we took as many statements as we could. We contacted the airports, the Coast Guard, I mean, you name it. There wasn't an agency that we didn't contact about it, and drew a complete blank. Even years later, I met a chap who was a paramedic, and we were chatting away. And he says, I had a UFO sighting over Leeds. What did you? Yeah, when? He says, July the 23rd, 1984. Same thing. And he's still a friend of mine now. But when I first met him, it was just a paramedic. I didn't know him. So hundreds that particular night. Is there an explanation for it? Possibly. Could I find one? I've not found one yet. But I wouldn't rule it out. But the next day when I went back into work, colleagues driving home similar routes saying, oh, did you see that thing in the sky last night? So all my colleagues knew of my involvement. And I said, yeah, I did. What was it? Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. So there you go. Hundreds, quite literally hundreds.
Wow, that's amazing. That's truly amazing.
Well, what bothered me, Rodney, is that I used to always keep a camera in my car, but I'd had my car stolen before. Although I got the car back, it wasn't damaged. They just stole everything in it, including my camera. So I bought a new camera, but I thought, I'm not leaving it in the car anymore. And I kicked myself that night, I knew a little bit about photography. I knew how to take photographs at night without a flash and all this lot. And had I had my camera there, I could have got some wonderful pictures of what I was seeing. But it was at home, And by the time I'd gone home and come back, it didn't reappear. And there were even some police officers on patrol down in the city of Leeds, reported it to us. And they had no idea what it was either. So people from across the spectrum reported it that night. And, if we find an explanation someday, that's fine. But I can't find one at the moment, I'm afraid.
Wow. Well, what was the event that happened in England in 1918 with the unexplained lights?
Say that again, Rodney.
What was the event that happened in England in 1918 with the unexplained lights?
In 1918, I thought it was in 1918. And yeah, you're talking about, allegedly, we had some strange lights seen over parts of the UK. And, it was hinted that this was the Germans and so on. However, a friend of mine, who was a PhD, has speculated that one of the people behind this story was actually Winston Churchill, Sir Winston Churchill. And whether or not there was any light seen is debatable. But of course, Churchill was he wasn't the Prime Minister then, but he was in the war. I think it was part of the Admiral, or it was part of the war effort. And he was trying to get extra funds, from the government. And he used that as an excuse to get more money. Now, whether there was any lights seen or not is debatable. What is interesting is that just in the last few weeks, an unpublished essay by Sir Winston Churchill has surfaced. In that essay, he writes about his belief that there are beings elsewhere in the universe. And I've read it. I've read parts of it, and it's not a, it's not a rumor. It is a fact, and it's owned by a university somewhere, and it's going on display. So none of us knew this. So I mean, we have an Air Ministry memo from the early 1950s when Churchill was Prime Minister for the second time. He says, "What's all this stuff about UFOs? Let me know." And I've got that memo. I've got a copy of it. So he was making inquiries then, but this unpublished essay was unknown about until recently, which he speculates his belief there that there's life elsewhere in the universe. And he's probably one of Britain's most famous ever people, our leader during the Second World War. So who knows? He was certainly a character, Rodney, and it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't use propaganda to his own ends within the UK. I mean, he was known for his rhetoric, which he used to great effect, at our time of need in the Second World War, but he also used it in the Houses of Parliament as well. I mean, I'll give you an example. One lady said to him in Parliament one day, "Mr. Churchill, you are drunk." He says, "Yes, madam, but tomorrow I'll be sober. You are ugly." So there you have it. That's Winston Churchill.
Well, from what I've read about him, he's a fascinating man, and I understand why he used propaganda to actually help with the war effort, especially to get America involved. And the question kind of goes into this with the technology that was rapidly advancing, especially for Germany at that time during the war, and England and the United States and other countries were trying to catch up. Do you think that there might have been some type of alien conversion with the Nazis or with the Allied forces to stop them? I mean, because I know I've studied and talked to a lot of people about this, and they're like, no. It just that point in time, how well advanced they came with their aircraft, their bombs, and everything. If it would have been another month, from what I read, that Hitler would have already had an atomic bomb.
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing about the Germans and their technology is that they had been preparing for war for many years before it actually happened, Rodney. Mm-hmm. And Churchill, who wasn't Prime Minister, was warning them. He was warning the British Parliament for a long time that do not listen to this man. He is preparing for war, and he is rearming and re-equipping. And that's why, in some respects, they were far ahead, because at the time, the British forces were, cutting back. We have quiz nights here in some of the pubs, Rodney, and one of the questions is, what started with a cavalry charge and ended with the atomic bomb? The answer is Second World War. And one of the reasons, that Hitler developed a new strategy of warfare, blitzkrieg. It had never been used before. It was, a modern industrial warfare. There was no rules, but as they had been before. And when he was threatening the French military called up one of their leaders from the First World War, and he led the attack on horseback. Well, of course, horseback was no match for Hitler's panzers and so on. So they had been preparing for war for quite a number of years. It didn't just spring out of nowhere. But it's like, certain countries are good at certain things, Rodney, and even today, German cars are well respected, mm-hmm. top of the range. It's just, for me, it's just one of the things that they are very good at. But we did catch up. And I don't know if it's true, but it is alleged that when the Battle of Britain was taking place, Hitler asked, the head of the Luftwaffe, what do you need to defeat the British? And he said, a squadron of Spitfires. So certainly in aerial combat, even at such an early time, Britain had caught them up and surpassed them in aerial superiority. So we know for a fact that Hitler and his henchmen were interested in a whole range of things, Rodney. And it's one of the things that's made good movies, isn't it? It's the Nazis, or in Indiana Jones are seeking, the Ark of the Covenant. But it is known that Hitler's hierarchy were interested in what we might call esoteric or occult things now. So again, nothing would surprise you about these lunatics, because they were. They weren't just. Again, I watched a movie last night, Valkyrie, with Tom Cruise. It was about one of the attempts to assassinate Hitler. But it was no good just killing him and his second in command. There had to be a coup afterwards to wipe out his whole ideology. I mean, the Brits, and I'm sure the Americans as well, think about just killing Hitler, but it wouldn't have had any effect because his second in command was even more bonkers than he was.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to take the whole regime, you had to defeat the whole lot. But they, and as we know, it was von Braun who put the Americans on the moon. So they were advanced in a lot of ways. However, when it came to things like radar, they were behind. We had radar long before the Nazis did. And we also broke the Enigma decoder. So I think it was, in some respects they were very good at engineering, but we caught up, and thankfully, we lived to tell the tale. My father saw active service during the war, and my mum made ammunition. So I always said that my mum made the bullets and my old man fired them.
Wow. Well, and this next question kind of goes into where, I don't know if you watched the show or read Kurt Vonnegut's, maybe I got him wrong. Maybe it's Kurt Vonnegut. The War of Gods.
I mean Eric von Däniken.
Von Däniken, yes, sorry.
Yep.
In his theory about how aliens, advanced humans and maybe even change their DNA to become workers for them, I guess, for mining gold, because where there's evidence in South Africa of these mining tunnels that date back, they said, from what I understand, thousands and thousands of years ago, if not hundreds of thousands of years ago. Within your research, have you stumbled or maybe even done a little cross path with that possibility?
Rodney, I mean, I met Eric von Däniken at a conference in Vienna. He was one of the speakers, and I had dinner with him. And I remember reading his initial book, Chariots of the Gods, and was stunned by it. But if you look back on it, what Chariots of the Gods teaches you to do, Rodney, rather than look at the individual claims about this object or that object, it teaches you to question things. Mm-hmm. And I said, if we didn't question anything, we didn't disagree, we'd probably all still be living in the jungle, or there would be no advancement. I always say, oh, were you skeptical? Well, I'll give you a story. There's two gentlemen in America who were brothers who were skeptical. They were called the Wright brothers, and they built and flew the first airplane because the scientific terminology of the day was you couldn't do it, and there were certain scientists still wouldn't believe them when they flew at Kitty Hawk because they were skeptical. Mm-hmm. So that's what Chariots of the Gods teaches you to do. Not necessarily be skeptical, but challenge the accepted ideas. Sometimes they'll be proven to correct, sometimes they'll be wrong, or they might be modified. And I would never rule out the ancient astronaut theory. I don't think there's any definitive, concrete, hard evidence. A lot of the evidence is open to interpretation, but some of it is mind-boggling. And you can, I mean, a few years back, I managed to visit the pyramids at Giza. And I'm astounded. And I'm not saying anything. All I'm saying is the Great Pyramid at Giza had to have one of its stone blocks put in place every 4 minutes for 20 years solid. So 24 hours a day for 20 years, you know, around the clock, they had to put one of those blocks in place every 4 minutes. How did they do it, Rodney? Nobody knows. They don't know. And it amazes me, you know, and you go there and stand and you see the size of these things, you know. So I wouldn't rule it out. I think the ancient astronaut theory is one that is fascinating and could quite possibly be correct. But again, you know, any definitive proof is, for me, still eludes us. But it's one of those theories that I particularly like, and I wouldn't cross it off the board at all. I really wouldn't. I met Eric. Eric was a lovely man. Obviously passionate about what he does. Yes, he's been successful, but he never got into this. I mean, he ended up in jail at one time for not paying his taxes, you know, and he's convinced it was a setup, you know, because you know of his claims he was making. But that's absolutely fascinating, and I've watched a few of the Ancient Aliens programs, things like that, and I think it's an area of study that I wish I'd got more involved in, but I think it's a bit too late for me now.
Oh, it's never too late. It's never too late. Do you only research the UFO phenomenon, or have you ever researched anything like the paranormal or crypto? Because seeing how they kind of all three kind of fit together in some areas.
Yeah, I mean, I've mainly stuck to what I know, Rodney, which is the UFO subject. But now and again, you know, the paranormal crops up. I mean, I even had analysed a few years back a photograph from a church in Hungary that was allegedly a sighting of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And this figure is in the church, and the photograph turned out inconclusive. The analysis we had done, but it landed on my desk. So I thought, well, I'll have a look into this, you know. And I know lots of colleagues who are involved in all kinds of paranormal research. So if there's anything I need to know, I can ask them, or I can just pass it on to them. But I have, and I did as a young lad at school. You know, I went to the spiritualist church not because as a religion or anything like that, just because it simply fascinated me. I mean, I never knew my grandparents. They died before I was born one day, and I remember I was about, 8 or 9 years old when we moved house. And I remember going into the new house, and I could smell this strong odor. And to me, it smelled like, you know, pipe tobacco. And I told my mum, and she's like, so that's one of your granddad. He used to smoke a pipe. Apparently, I didn't know. And my mum was from Northern Ireland. And the place where she lived as a youngster was in quite a rural part of Northern Ireland. And she told me and my children the story of when she was a little girl playing down by the stream when she met a fairy and communicated with it. And I asked her about this, and she said to me, it was very real, son, you know. And I have no reason to disbelieve her. You know, she told me, she told her own grandchildren the same story. And like I said, my ex-wife, I gave her the psychic phenomenon experience with the guy at the newspaper, but she had a couple of other incidents as well. And, you know, what can you do? I've been blessed. But sometimes, you know, you come across certain UFO witnesses, they report other things, and they're what we would term paranormal, Rodney. And so you either deal with it or you pass it on. But, you know, I'll look into pretty much 99% of what I've done has been UFO research, but there has been other bits and pieces as well, yes.
Well, one time we was doing a investigation. We was out in the woods, and a couple of times that we've been on investigations while we've been out, we, a couple of us have seen, some strange lights in the sky. And on this one investigation, I had a recorder on, and while we were walking, me and this guy, we're talking, just bullshitting. And next thing I know, when I went back to listen to the recording, it sounded like we was on a catwalk, a metal catwalk in a big warehouse. And this went on for like 20 seconds, and then you can hear us back in the woods. But we didn't see anything, we didn't feel anything or nothing at that moment. I mean, we were still casually talking. You could tell that we didn't even know what had happened. And, the guy that was with me, when I played it to him, he's like, do you think that we went somewhere else? I'm like, it sounds like we went somewhere else, but I can't explain it. Have you ever had any type of, any of the people that you've talked to or any of your research have come up with anything like that?
I'll give you one story. I mentioned we spent 9 days on Carlton Moor in a caravan.
Mm-hmm.
I encouraged local people to come and report sightings to us. Well, one sort of elderly couple came, and they lived in the area all their life. And once a fortnight, they used to drive out of the town to another place to go to the supermarket because there wasn't one where they lived. Same route they used to do every fortnight, Rodney, And they're coming back from the supermarket one night, it was dark. And the lady said to her husband, he was driving, look at that. They've opened a factory. And she said, set back from the road was this building with a turret in the middle, all these lights on, all illuminated. So it looked like a factory. So they went home and forgot about it. Of course, they went back there again, same route coming back. Guess what? There is no factory there, and there never has been. So they said, what was it? What? And I've driven the route. They told me, and they showed me on the map. I've driven that route, and there is no building, even remotely, that looks anything like what they described. And they were completely bamboozled, Rodney. Mm-hmm. They did this building, what they described as a building, a factory. What was it? Where did it go? I don't know. I didn't have an answer then for them, and I certainly don't have one now. So you tell me what it was, because I don't know.
I have no idea. Because it has stunned me. I mean, this happened, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, and still yet that audio, I'll go back and play it now and then and just listen and try to figure out how was that possible, and how did we not see, feel, smell, or anything to affect us to get that kind of response?
Well, there you go. I don't have an explanation. I really don't. And that was one of the, we had 100 or so incidents reported to us those 9 days. And that was probably one of the most peculiar ones. It really was. And one of our colleagues who lived in the area at the time, he was a sergeant in the police force, sadly no longer with us, Tony Dodd. And he got called out to a burglary. This couple had phoned the police and said, we've been burgled while we've been out. So Tony and his colleague turned up, went into the house, and there was nothing missing, Rodney. But while they were out, everything in their house had been turned upside down. I don't mean thrown. I mean literally, there was an ornament, it was turned upside down.
Wow.
Nothing broken, nothing stolen, nothing. They reported it as a burglary. Somebody had been in, but it was all upside down. And Tony also got called to a fire. And they got there before the fire brigade. And he said, we're taught, his training was when you kick the door in, you then go down on your knees because obviously the heat rises. Mm-hmm. And he was crawling in through the door and he could see into the room and he said there was a man, a body on the floor, and there was just a flame coming from his torso. That was it. That was the fire. And he was convinced it was spontaneous human combustion. He said, I've seen all kinds of incidents down the years. He was a long-serving police officer. He said, I've never seen anything like that in my life.
Wow.
There you go. There you go.
There's a lot of wow moments in.
Well, again, like I said, this was all in this same area where we had intense UFO activity in the 1980s. So again, once you start digging under the surface, you then find out all these other things that are going on. In what? I mean, there isn't a huge. I mean, Skipton's not a huge town, and once you get out of the town, it's not remote countryside. We're only a little island. You can't get that remote, but it's sparsely populated in a lot of areas. And I mean, again, Tony was on driving one evening, and all these people, all dressed in black, run across the road in front of him. He nearly run them over. He thought, what the hell's going on? It was the SAS on a training exercise, and they informed nobody that they were training. That was, their secret. Special Air Service. Then he said, I could have killed some of our finest troops. I could have run them over. And then up on the moors above one of the villages, people were finding small bundles of clothes that weren't ripped up. They were folded neat. And they couldn't figure that, why would somebody put clothes up here? Well, what it was, there was still witchcraft practiced in the area. And that was part of their ritual. Nothing sinister or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, witchcraft was still practiced there. And if you drive over the border into Lancashire, there's an area that's renowned for witchcraft, but in medieval times. But there's still things like that. And they used to have little bundles of twigs, and they were like markers, or to let other people know they were practicing certain things in the area, like a signpost. But to us, they would just look like a little bundle of twigs. Wouldn't mean anything. So this area had all this going on, and UFOs as well. And the devil dog that walked down the village, and all kinds of other things. So it was a bizarre time. It really was.
Wow. Well, have you ever found any evidence of any cave art or any ancient manuscripts that show any type of aliens or crafts or natives of that time communicating?
I mean, there's of that kind of thing here in Britain, although we've got plenty of ancient monuments, like Stonehenge, and it's probably the most famous example. But Britain is littered with ancient monuments of that nature. And the cup and ring markings, again on the moors out near not far from where we live, is one of the few areas in the world where the symbol of the swastika is on a stone there. But of course, in ancient times, it wasn't. It was a good luck charm, was the swastika. It was only converted by the Nazis in the 20th century to mean something else. But there's nothing like that. I mean, as old as Britain is, it doesn't have that. Certainly ancient monuments. And, they come up with new theories, every year of why they use these monuments, what was their purpose. And nobody really knows, because there was no written language in those days, obviously. Mm-hmm. We have to remember Stonehenge was built before the pyramids. Are you aware of that? Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of old stuff. But again, it's all open to interpretation. Even in the little area where I live, the Romans were here, and they've just found some Roman burials in this last few weeks, and they've just dug them up. My son-in-law was working on the building site where they were uncovered. So, nothing to do with aliens, I know, but we've got a lot of old stuff, but nothing. My sister lives in Australia, and she sent me a poster from one of the caves there, the paintings, and they are really peculiar, done by the Aboriginal people. But we've got nothing that looks like that whatsoever, I'm afraid.
Do you know of any government that has any files, UFO files that you've done under your research, and who has the most, that maybe be covering it up, some kind of conspiracy of the knowledge of the UFO phenomenon?
Well, our Ministry of Defence keeps telling us that they've released all their files. And then they'll say, we forgot these few. We've just found another 40 or 50. So what is intriguing, I interviewed a wing commander, Alan Turner, OBE, and he was top security classification, top secret, and he was so high up the tree in the RAF that even when the American spy plane used to come into Britain to refuel, he was notified about it. And he was in command of the radar, and he told us of an incident one evening when he tracked 6 unknown objects over mainland UK. This was also tracked by Heathrow and other military radar, and he was immediately informed to submit an official report, which he did. What is interesting is when you go to the National Archives, where the Ministry of Defence files are located, Wing Commander Alan Turner's report is nowhere to be found. And he also gave us some of his colleagues who were under his command, although not that night, who worked at other places, who had similar incidents. And again, I spoke to a lieutenant, and they tracked this object on radar one night, and at the airbase they were at, they had guards outside who also saw it visually. So all of them submitted reports. I managed to find the guards' reports, but not of their commanding officer. These have disappeared. And when you look at the files that the MOD have released, the highest security classification on any of them is secret. None of them are stamped top secret. So it leads people to believe that, yes, they have released a lot of files, and there are some interesting reports in there from both civilian and military sources, but they're all labelled, at best, secret. Where's the top secret? They're saying that they never classified any UFO reports top secret, and you can't get a straight answer out of them, don't they?
Right.
I'll give you an example. I told you about Rendlesham. When Rendlesham first hit the news headlines, it was because Colonel Holt wrote a memo about it at the time. That memo was released in America under the Freedom of Information Act. I contacted our own Ministry of Defence and asked them for a copy. And they said, we have nothing on this incident. And they maintained that for a number of years. And I tried them again several years later. Lo and behold, guess what? They did have a copy. And so they lied, because when Colonel Holt wrote the memo, it went both to the Ministry of Defence and the United States Air Force. So they both got a copy. So were they lying, or was it just they couldn't be bothered, or whatever? I don't know. So it doesn't help, does it? I mean, I'm not a big believer of conspiracies, but when things like that happen, it does make you wonder. It really does.
Yeah, it sure does. Well, have you interviewed or discussed any UFO phenomenon with any astronauts, either NASA or with your space agencies?
Well, no. I mean, we've only had 2 Brits in space. First was a lady, Helen Sharman, and then we've had Major Tim Peake recently. So we've only had 2 Brits. I did meet a cosmonaut out in conference at San Marino, and he'd been on the Mir space station, and he personally had no sightings. He did confirm through an interpreter that some of the stories about the Soviet cosmonauts seeing and hearing things in space were indeed correct, and so it was interesting to get information from somebody who had actually left the planet, but I also spoke to a number of people who claimed this, that, and the other, and I've heard this astronaut. I'm convinced that some of the Soviet cosmonauts did experience strange phenomena in space, and by that I should reckon that certainly other astronauts that have been in space from whichever country may well have experienced things. For example, I think some of the earlier astronauts, they kept reporting seeing little flashes of light. And this was, quite disturbing. But when it all turned out, they found out what it was. It was cosmic rays. Well, the cosmic rays moved through their eyes. It gave up a little light. So there was nothing extraordinary about it. But had they not mentioned it, Rodney, we would never have been able to find that out. I talked earlier about us, logging things, and cataloguing things, saving things, and somebody sometime might be able to figure it out. Well, that's exactly what happened in this instance. But it doesn't account. See, people keep saying about lunar bases and all this. Well, I don't agree, but for many years, prior to the lunar landings, there was lights reported on the moon. And it even had an official astronomical name. It was called TLP, Transient Lunar Phenomena, i.e. lights seen on the moon. That's kind of died off. We don't hear about it anymore. But I mentioned my pal Albert Budden. He said, "Well, could there be, like the lights we have seen in places here, like the Martha lights and so on? Could that be a lunar equivalent? I don't know, but it's certainly a puzzle. It really is."
It is. Well, with the crashes that you've mentioned, have there been any type of solid physical evidence to back the claims of these crashes? Any type of material or equipment or anything like that?
The only thing that's puzzled me is a colleague of mine. He's in America. It's called Daryl Sims. Mm-hmm. Daryl's formerly in military intelligence, various other things. We were out at the conference in San Marino, and Daryl brought with him a piece of material about the size of a small coin, and it being passed to him, claiming to be from a UFO crash. And there was a chap there who had a titanium watch, and he says it's almost impossible to scratch this watch. So Daryl got this piece, got his watch, and lo and behold, and he was stunned. He scratched it with no problem at all. I've taken photographs of it. It's in his palm of his hand. I don't know what ever happened to it, but it was certainly intriguing. Who knows? It could well be right, but but there's been no technology that I'm aware of, Rodney, that would definitively prove anything. And I think you might say the same. I mean, what we will be doing is on June the 1st of this year, I'm publishing a book by Irina Scott, PhD. She lives in Ohio. And in that particular book, it's called UFOs Today, 70 Years of Lies, Misinformation and Government Cover-Up. We will be releasing the testimony of an alleged new witness to the Roswell crash. And I won't say too much about it, but he was a deputy sheriff at the time, not at Roswell. He was out of that area, but he and his sheriff were en route to Roswell to pick up a prisoner when they heard about the crash on the police radio, and diverted to the area. And he claims he saw the craft and the bodies. So that'll be going. That's in Irina's book, and we're putting it out there to see if it is correct or not. Is anybody else? Unfortunately, he's deceased now. He had no offspring. So maybe somebody else might know about it. But it's a fascinating book. Irina was one of those on the inside. Her husband did work at Nellis Air Force Base, part of Area 51, of course. I have his paperwork to prove it. And so it's a fascinating read. So keep your eyes open, listeners.
Oh, I certainly will. Do you know of any attacks by UFOs, whether it be on a city, town, military base, military equipment, aircraft, ships, so forth?
Certainly not in the UK. That springs to mind. I mean, there's been injuries, minor injuries. I mentioned Police Constable Alan Godfrey, who had a missing time experience while sat in his patrol car on duty. Now, when he got back to the police station, Alan noticed that first his police boot was split underneath the sole of it, and he had a burn on the instep of his heel that had not been there the night before. I also mentioned the young man in Pwllheli, northwest Wales, and he'd had a burn on his wrist. So there's been minor injuries, if you like, or we might call it a small amount of collateral damage, but nothing significant, and certainly no intent to disarm or hurt individuals. Maybe it's just a byproduct of some of these experiences. I don't know, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Well, going back to the moon, well, what are your thoughts on the unexplained lights? I know you mentioned that a little bit on the background of the NASA moon landing photos, because I do know that some of the photos that they took while they were on the moon, they do have some unexplained lights in the background. Could that be the cosmic rays, or is that something else, or do you know?
Well, there's a variety of problems. There's the official NASA photographs, and then with the advent of the internet, there's what somebody calls a NASA photograph. Mm-hmm. And there's no way of verifying its original source, Rodney. Because when you put something out on the internet and it gets circulated around and around and around and around, it's almost impossible to find out where it's what they call fake news,
Right.
But people argue, why didn't they go back to the moon? We have to remember why they went there in the first place. There was only ever one scientist went to the moon, and he was a geologist. This was a military exercise to beat the Russians. That's all it was, and they achieved their objective. It was hugely costly. It cost an enormous amount of money. And if we're honest, certainly the US public had become bored with it. Mm-hmm. Hence the story about Apollo 13. Some of the live broadcasts weren't broadcast live. They were watching I Love Lucy instead. And it was only the fact that the disaster or near disaster happened that it became a news item. So even by Apollo 13, it had become boring, So, and we also look at the moon. There is no oil there. There's no minerals, Rodney. There's no gold. There's nothing worth pinching, which is why, in a lot of instances, mankind, let's be honest, have explored other areas. When the Spaniards landed in South America, they couldn't give a monkeys about the indigenous tribes. They just wanted to steal their gold. And that's exactly what they did. There isn't anything worth having like that on the moon, apart from the rocks. You can sell them, but you can't bring them back. So, I attended a lecture by Buzz Aldrin. And I'll never forget his parting comment. And it was, and for those, he never mentioned it during his presentation, Rodney, but right at the end, he said, for those who don't believe we went to the moon, ask the Russians. That said it all, really.
Yeah.
I was convinced as a young boy that once we'd been to the moon, then it was the next step to Mars. I mean, I didn't understand the difficulties of it. I mean, half of the space probes we've sent to Mars have all crashed. Half. So it is, extremely difficult to get there and back. But, a human. I think it will happen. I don't doubt it will happen someday. But as for other exploration out in the solar system, unless we develop new technologies, then we can forget about it. Right. We will have to have something that goes a lot faster. We will have to have, artificial gravity. We'll have to have some ways of, producing food and water. I mean, it's as simple as that. But, I think we'll get there. Not in our lifetime, I don't think. But the one thing about mankind, Rodney, is that we've never been content, have we? We've always wanted to know what's over the next horizon, what's around that corner, what's in those trees, what's on the moon, what's on that, and that is inbred in us, and I don't know. It could be that we are the only species in the entire universe that has that drive. There could well be intelligent, beings live elsewhere, but they're quite content with their own little back garden, Rodney. and have no desire to know what's around the corner, or what's on the next planet. We don't know, do we? But it's just something that I'd love to see us go back to the moment in my lifetime. And I know there's talks about an international expedition, or the Chinese or the Indians going. Well, it will be great. We'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yeah, I'd love to see us go back to the moon too. Well, I know you said you're not really a religious person, but what do you think the religious ramifications would be if your research and everyone else's research proves that there is intelligent alien life?
I don't think there would be any ramifications, Rodney, because if you believe in creation, then God created the heavens and earth and everything else in it. Just because he hasn't mentioned other beings in the Bible or the Quran or the Torah or whatever, doesn't make any difference. I'm sure that the various religions would say, well, there you go. It just shows how great our God is. You didn't just make us, you made them as well. So I don't think there would be any. I mean, I've asked this question. I'm not religious, and I don't believe in anything, but I am interested in religion. Mm-hmm. And I've asked, people, and they just shake their heads. It won't bother us at all. Wouldn't alter our beliefs whatsoever. I mean, I remember speaking to a vicar, and he said, the Lord says there are many mansions, there are many rooms in my mansion. In other words, there you go. It's open to interpretation, isn't it? But of course, if we go back into the Old Testament, and some people forget this, that the Old Testament of the Christian Bible is also shared by the Muslims. Mm-hmm. They believe in Jacob and all the other Noah's Ark and all that kind of stuff. They even believe in Jesus. But to them, Jesus was a prophet. He wasn't a Messiah. And, it does mention other beings being on Earth before, Adam and Eve were giants in those days. I mean, I've got friends who are Mormons, and they believe in their religion that you can trace our ancestry direct from us right back to Adam and Eve, the literal Adam and Eve, man and a woman. So I said, okay. I said, you've got a man and a woman, they have two sons. One of those sons kills the other one. So where did everybody else come from?
Especially where it says the part where he was banished and he went to the land of Nod where he met his wife.
There you go. So even in the Bible, there's mentions of other beings.
Exactly.
Again, it's open to interpretation. So I don't think it would have any religious ramifications whatsoever. I think it would only strengthen people's religious beliefs to say, look how great God is. He created all this magnificence. And if you this is a science fiction movie. It's Contact with Jodie Foster. Mm-hmm. And as a child, she talks about space with her dad. And she asked that question, is there life out there? And he said, it would be an awful waste of space if there wasn't. And she quotes that towards the end of the movie as well. And I've often used that same phrase, if there isn't or wasn't or will be life elsewhere out in the universe, it's an awful waste of space.
Exactly. And that kind of goes into my next question, can you explain SETI and its purpose? No,
I think it's a complete waste of time.
Okay.
I have a friend in London who was a big follower of SETI, and I said, where do you point your radio telescope scopes out? It's even our own little, Milky Way. It's vast. It really is. And if we get a communication, we're assuming we can decipher it. Then you're assuming that mathematics or physics is a universal language. Well, we often say, look, we can't even communicate with the other species on our own planet. We can't talk to a dolphin. They're supposed to be highly intelligent. But how are we going to talk to? How are we going to know of an alien city? You won't know it. It hit you in the face. And what would be the purpose? Because it would have come so far. By the time we replied, that civilization could be dead and gone. So it's a romantic idea, isn't it? You know, sat there with your earphones on and ET phones, but I think, you know, to me it's a waste of money. I'd rather build hospitals and schools with it instead. You know, as simple as that.
Right. Well, do you know of anyone, or have yourself found any type of Martian fossils anywhere?
Well, no. I mean, you know, we have meat like anybody else, but again, as you probably know, Rodney, there is the theory that we could all be Martians because one of your own presidents, Bill Clinton, was the release at the time of a Martian meteorite that possibly had a microfossil in it. In other words, it was bacterial, but it was a fossil of it. I read a book many years back by Sir Fred Hoyle, British astronomer, called The Intelligent Universe. I still have that book. And in there, long before the announcement of the Martian meteorite, Sir Fred Hoyle talked about the very same thing, that bacterial life, at the very least, is abundant in the universe. And there are signs of it in meteorites. And some of those have come from Mars. So when we look back and speculate how life started here on Earth, perhaps it didn't. Perhaps it was brought to Earth on a Martian meteorite. It was bacterial life that flourished. And hey presto, here we are today.
Well, that kind of goes into the panspermia.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay. There's a question that Robin wanted me to ask. If you could meet with an alien, what would be the first question you would ask of it? And that is, if you could communicate with it.
That's a question I've been asked before. It's very difficult to answer, is it not, Rodney?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'd say, question I could ask really would be, you can have a look at it on a personal level, or you could look at it on a level of mankind. You know, on a personal level, because I suffer from heart disease, I could ask, hello mate, you know, can you tell me, can you fix my heart disease? Can you cure this? Or alternatively, you know, you say, can you help mankind? You know, can you help us? Something along those lines. You'd have so many questions running around your head, Rodney, that you'd probably still do like a babbling idiot. I'd be thinking, what a waste of time coming here to make this perform. You know, he can't get his words out, you know. And if you watch I don't know if anybody's seen the sci-fi film Arrival, they find it very difficult to communicate with this intelligence that's come to Earth and to ask the right questions, which leads me to something nicely. I mean, Whitley Strieber was a speaker at one of the conferences I organised, and he did a fascinating presentation. And then he took questions and answers at the end. And one of the things he said was, you know, somebody asked him, have we learned anything? And I think this applies to the whole UFO phenomena, not just the experiences. He said, we're learning to ask better questions. And I thought that was quite profound. And it's almost like, you know, the knocking on the film set. That was quite profound. And I think he's right. I think since, you know, ufology began, we have, over the decades, learned to ask better questions. And we are still learning. And long may that continue, Rodney.
Well, what are your biggest regrets in your UFO research?
My biggest regret is one, when I had that sighting, I didn't have my camera with me because I was a competent photographer, convinced I could have captured what I was seeing. Other regrets, you know, is that I didn't get involved earlier. I mean, I was 21 when I started. I'm almost 59 now. I would love to have got involved as early as possible, and personal regrets. I've never been involved in this subject for money. I mean, if I were to add up how much I'd spent on it, my wife would go bananas. But I did have a movie contract faxed to me many years back, and I turned it down. I regret doing that because I've seen other UFO movies made, and I think, oh God, how awful they are,
Yeah.
So that's a personal regret, not for the money. I would have made a few dollars out of it, yes, but it wasn't the money. It was, So I wish I'd have had a camera with me that night, and not many more regrets than that, Rodney. I mean, if I don't think we live life with regrets. You can't go back in time, and none of us have the benefit of hindsight. But those are certainly two minor ones anyway. But nothing major.
Right. Well, have you, during your research, have you dealt with any crop circles? And if so, what's your opinion about them?
Yeah. When the crop circle phenomena, exploded in the 1980s, and there was one particular formation, which was a large circle with 4 circles around it, almost like a cross shape, and it was below a monument in Wiltshire, below the White Horse at Westbury, in the field there. So literally, Fred and I jumped in the car and shot off. We were gone, and we pulled up at side of this field, took photographs and measurements, and then we went up onto the top of the hill where the White Horse is, and we found another circle in the corner that no one had mentioned, and I compared these photographs to the circles in the wheat that were found in Australia, the Tully landing, and there weren't anything like it. These were very precise, almost mathematically precise, whereas the circles at Tully in Oz were not. So I thought, it didn't add up to me, and I came to the conclusion that they're all man-made, Rodney. That was my conclusion. Not immediately. Down the years, I've seen people fake these things. I've seen them filming themselves faking it, and we even have advertisements here for TV shows that have a crop circle, with the TV program's logo. I know the guy that does it, and he is an artist, and he used to work it out, on graph paper, mathematically. But again, I may well be wrong, but for me, there's nothing to it. And again, I think it's all one big giant con, or hoax, I would say.
Now, are the crop circles different from the fairy rings? Because I've read a little bit about them, but I haven't, not much.
Yeah, the fairy rings are totally different. Fairy rings are not even a perfect circle. They are circular, not perfect circle. And they appear in rural places, and it's been probably accepted now that it's a kind of fungus, and that's how it grows, but it looks like a circle. Of course, in medieval times, they couldn't explain it, so they made up a story to try and explain it. It was the fairy rings. But it's interesting you should mention fairies. Probably the most famous fairy case was the Cottingley fairies in West Yorkshire 100 years ago. This last week, and 2 young girls took photographs of the fairies, and they even convinced Sir Arthur Conan Doyle that they were authentic. But of course, down the years, eventually it came out that they weren't. The 2 young girls, as elderly ladies, admitted they'd hoaxed it, but still claimed to have seen real fairies. Mm-hmm. And it was the 100th anniversary of those particular photographs just this last week. And of course, my mum says she saw a fairy when she lived in Ireland, so I've no reason to doubt it.
Right. I know I've had some people tell me that they've seen fairies. I've even had people send me pictures where they were saying that they were fairies, but actually it's a moth.
Oh, yeah.
That it's the way they caught it in flight.
That's right. Whether the light hits it and so on, yes.
Mm-hmm. And of course, when you tell them that, they get all pissy.
I like it.
Can you give everybody some information about how they can, contact you, how they can get a copy of your books or any of your seminars and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely, Rodney. I mean, the best way to contact me is on email, and it's philip.mantle@gmail.com. That's Philip with one L. I'm on Facebook. You can find me there under my name or Flying Disc Press, and you'll easily find me. I'm splattered all over the place, Rodney. I'd love to hear, from people, and if you want to ask me questions, that's fine. All my books are on Amazon. You just do a search, Philip Mantle, you'll find them. They're all there. And I hope you enjoy reading them if you purchase one. But get in touch. We'd be glad to hear from you.
Okay, I appreciate that. And also, real quick, what are your plans for 2017? You got anything? I know you mentioned your book that's going to be coming out. You got any seminars or any places that you might be traveling, this year where people might come meet up with you?
Not in the United States, unfortunately, but I'll be speaking at a conference here on the 9th of September at the Freedom Centre in Hull. That's on Humberside. And that's sponsored by Outer Limits magazine. So I'm one of the speakers there. That's Saturday the 9th of September. And what I've also been doing, Rodney, is I have a large archive of paper files, research, UFO sighting reports, I mean, you name it, official documents, the lot. So I've been working with a gentleman by the name of Steve Mira, and we are digitizing my whole collection. So we've got one file drawer done. That's taken about a year to do. So I'll be collecting those soon, and then we'll be on to the next lot. So that way they're all preserved for posterity. And we'll try and make them available online free of charge at some point as well.
Awesome. Well, Philip, I appreciate you taking the time out. Yeah, I know you're busy, and it's been an honor to speak with you and to learn from you and to get some insights from you. Anytime if you get a chance and you want to come back and we'll talk some more but I can sit and talk your damn leg off.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Rodney.
Okay, sir. You have a good night, and you get you a drink of water.
Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a good night. Well, that's it for us tonight. I want to thank Philip Mantle for coming on the show, and to thank everyone that took the time to listen in. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Vibe Radio Network, to Holly and Ryan. Thank you all for putting up with us. Also to all the first responders and our men and women in the armed services. Thank you for your service and everything you all do. Our guest for June 15th is American film and television actress, my girlfriend, the hot, the sexy, the sensual Laureen Landon. Oh, it's going to be exciting to talk to her. So everybody tune in next week to another exciting show where we get to find out all the secrets of Hollywood. So thanks again to everyone. Until next week, be safe and have a good night.
victory. Fight! control. Are you sure? Control is not convinced, but the computer has the evidence. No need to abort. The countdown starts. Watching in a trance, the crew is certain, nothing left to chance. All is working, trying to relax. Up in the capsule, sent me up a drink. Jokes, Major Tom. The count goes on. 4, 3, 2, 1. Earth below, 15 falling, floating, weighted, calling, calling home. Second stage is cut. We're now in orbit. Stabilizers up. Running perfect. Starting to collect. Requested data. What will it affect when all is done? Think Major Tom. Back at ground control. There is a problem. Go to rockets full. Not responding. Hello, Major Tom. Are you receiving? Turn the thrusters on. We're standing by. There's no reply. 4, 3, 2, 1. Earth below, 15 falling, floating, weighted, calling, calling home. Across the stratosphere, a final message. Give my wife my love, then nothing more. Far beneath the ship, the world is mourning. Satan came alive. He's alive. No one understands, but Major Tom sees all the light commands. This is my home. I'm coming home. Earth below, 15 falling, floating, weighted, coming home. Earth below, 15 falling, floating, weighted, coming home. Earth below, 15 falling, floating, weighted,
Staples knows that when the leave-behinds for your sales call get left behind at your office, it's time. When you need to print 30 pages and you're 300 miles from the office, it's time. And when the intern packed the Harrington file, not the Farrington file.
Oh, my bad.
It's definitely time. And it's times like these when you can count on Staples. Access your files from email, the cloud, or USB, and then print, copy, fax, or scan them, and get back to business fast. Visit your nearby Staples. It's pro time.
Progressive presents Mindfulness with Flow.
You are a mighty fortress of supreme knowledge. Progressive Direct has not only revealed their rates, but those of their competitors. If you were any more in the know, you would be drowning in, the know.
Compare Progressive Direct rates with competitors' rates, because knowledge is power. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.